The question on everyone's mind is, when do I get my machine? So, EufyMake dropped an update to their Kickstarter, and it's honestly ticking some people off. But here's the thing, it really shouldn't. By the way, if you're not familiar with my channel, hi, my name is Sarah. This is my studio. I do all sorts of crafting projects, including 3D printing, laser cutting, all sorts of stuff. Also, before I start getting into the EufyMake update, if you could take a moment and maybe hit the hype button if it's available down below. It's a new feature that YouTube is using to try and help promote videos from small channels. Their definition of a small channel, by the way, is less than 500,000 subscribers. So as somebody who just hit 6,000 subscribers, which thank you, by the way, I really appreciate that. I'm like an itty bitty little minnow swimming in the ocean and would certainly appreciate the boost. But in the meantime, let's get into the update and what's going on and the feathers that it's starting to ruffle. One of the things that I was particularly looking forward to is adding UV printing to my docket. UV printing is honestly a complicated endeavor depending on what you're using. I know there's various machines out on the market, many of them costing several grand, honestly. But recently, EufyMake, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, if not, that's going to be how I pronounce it the entire video, so just deal with it. But recently they ran a Kickstarter over the summer introducing a much smaller UV printer design, something that could be used for smaller makers like me or small business owners. Although I think if you're running like a well-established small business, you might really want to invest with a bigger machine, just given its size, but that's me. This has been a Kickstarter that the marketing team has really revved up. There's been all sorts of YouTube influencers that have shown you guys what you can do with it, ranging from big channels to small channels. Their Kickstarter was extremely successful. They initially had a goal of 500,000, and they ended up by the end getting $46.7 million in backing of this item. And I think far and away, that probably surpassed what they expected. I imagine they expected to at least hit at 10x, like maybe 5 million, but I don't think they expected 46.7 million. And that's almost 18,000 backers. Far and away, a huge success. And part of, I think, what made this success was it was a company that has already kind of built things, and they had already shown that the device itself was going. They have videos of it. They had influencers showing you how it works, and they were already going into production with items. So the plan was once the Kickstarter ended, they would start shipping. But here's, I think, where we maybe started running into some problems. Now, the initial timeline that they had dropped on July 16th to give us an idea of where things were was that production was moving straight forward. They had images of the devices and in warehouses being put together. They were being very transparent with the production process. And the way they were talking about initially was that they expected the first batch to ship from late July to early August, with a emphasis on the US being the first area, with of course, prioritization being the V6 backers, deposit payers, early bird backers. So they were fairly transparent, at least in some of the shipping processes. They specified the first batch would go out as early August, but they never specified how many that was. Now, my initial thought was, okay, we're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 500. And I have my fingers crossed because admittedly, I'm backer number 487. And to tell you how popular this Kickstarter was, I'm backer 487, and I logged on to the website to back the Kickstarter about 10 minutes into it. Like, I literally had kind of been refreshing because I wanted to be part of the first batch, hopefully to get my item early so I could review it and show you guys all of the stuff. But 10 minutes into the project, they already had 500 people and had, honestly, I think at that point, met the goal. I could be off in my math, but it was met extremely quickly. So they didn't necessarily specify the first batch. And I did eventually see on a Facebook comment in the group that the first batch actually ended up being just 400. Oh well. So they could have been more transparent with that. But that's also fairly reasonable with a new device. They're only going to be able to make so many of these in a day. And of course, I know with the whole regional shipping priority and the US being first, that makes things a little more difficult for people who want this device that live in other countries. Why they opted to prioritize the US versus other countries, I can't say for certain, other than hopefully it was just a logistics issue. I know sometimes US buyers have more buying power and sometimes we get priority, but honestly, as a US citizen, I don't really feel that way. There's 350 million of us, give or take. There's 8 billion people on the planet. I'm worth no more than somebody living across the pond. I frankly would rather shipments be international and all on the same timeline, but that's just my opinion. But just for all of the international people who are stuck, who knew they were going to be stuck waiting longer, my condolences, definitely wouldn't have been my choice. Now, EufyMake has been pretty good about trying to keep us updated. Some people would argue no, they're not. But honestly, they've been updating us on a roughly monthly notification, sometimes a little bit quicker. And part of me is like, I mean, how often do you want them to update? I mean, they're like, okay, we're producing our items and we're getting ready to ship them. Here's the timeline that we currently have. What else is there? I mean, they've added in, hey, you know, this is when we're going to put the deposits back, hopefully. Hey, this is, you know, where we are with other things in terms of like, you know, the warranty and such. But I feel like they've been pretty consistent with updates, especially for a Kickstarter. I mean, I don't know about any of you guys, but I have backed Kickstarters where updates were few and far between, only to discover that it's completely gone and you're not getting your money back. Mega Tokyo, anyone? Just saying. But that's also admittedly a risk you take with Kickstarter. Kickstarter specifically builds in that warning that, you know, timelines may be delayed or you may never get your product, which, by the way, is not happening in this situation. But we are running into a timeline delay. Now, EufyMake published an update today, and for the record, their previous update came out on August 28th, so it's been 22 days since then, 3 weeks. They're letting us know, you know, an update in 3 weeks. And unfortunately, it says that we are running into some problems. So the update that they dropped today has said that they've got a situation that they want to let us know about. They had planned to start beginning shipments in the 3rd week of September. And I know people are already going, they promised the beginning of August. I'm like, okay, that's a 1-month delay. Considering the manufacturing process, which always will have delays built in, and then on top of it, the insanity that is the current shipping logistics with tariffs across the world, it being delayed by a month to me isn't really surprising. Honestly, I feel like they probably overpromised a little bit in the timeline. I think they were being optimistic, but at the same time, I feel like with any of this stuff, especially with new devices and Kickstarters in particular, you really should take your timeline and double it just out of habit. But this is still pretty impressive. The Kickstarter ended at the end of June, and they were planning to try and ship these items, the first round, within 3 months. That's kind of an impressive turnaround. I've had a single Kickstarter that I've backed that's had a turnaround time less than that, and it was for a deck of cards, and they, in the Kickstarter, were very honest that we've actually already printed these and we have them, you know, ready to go. It's just we're using a Kickstarter to kind of create sort of this, you know, momentum and all of that, and to gather all of the money rather than just doing it in our shop. That's the only time where I've had a Kickstarter happen much quicker than what Eufy's already doing. In fact, my husband had ordered a ultrasonic blade for me for Christmas in a Kickstarter with the plans that I would hopefully see it in March, and I don't think the blade showed up until July. And part of that was because they were having some issues with the blades coming out and not being up to par. So, and this is sort of what's going on again with EufyMake. So let's look at this update. They were honestly had things going, were ready to ship things out, but during final quality checks before shipping, an important step, they noticed a issue with the metering tank affecting around 5 to 10% of the units. And this was unexpected, and they take full responsibility for that. So this happens. That's part of the reason why you have this final quality check, especially when you're doing mass production of items. Keep in mind, they've been producing all of these, and this Kickstarter was incredibly successful. I really don't think they anticipated almost 18,000 backers. And that's assuming that each backer bought one machine. I'm sure there are people that bought more than machine. Anticipating that, and to just make numbers a little easier, let's say that They were maybe expecting initially 2,000 units, maybe 2,500 units to be in this kind of first round, and instead they're dealing with 20,000. That's a huge jump. And keep in mind, you do have to factor that in with manufacturing. You now need to go back to your manufacturer and go, okay, I actually need 20,000 rather than maybe 2,500. Now they need that time in the warehouse to put together. They need more supplies being added. They've probably added additional machines onto the process to try and manufacture this quickly, to say nothing of the shipping logistics where you now need to order additional boxes to be shipped across the seas to all of these countries, all of that, like huge changes most likely in the production line. And this may slow things down a little bit. But again, it also, given the number of backers and knowing whatever number you are, I think you should also keep that in mind that it's not realistic for everybody to be in the first batch. Like I said, I crossed my fingers and hoped I was in the first batch because I was 487 and I'm like, maybe it'll be 500. And it sounds like maybe it was 400. Not, it's totally unexpected. Neither is honestly finding a sudden defect that needs to be fixed, because as you're having to scale up production, the odds of errors happening then become much greater. In their message, they, talk about how they're disappointed with this delay and the fact that it's frustrating people. And we're going to explain what happened, as well as inviting 200 backers to join us for mass production testing. Scrolling down here, they've got this metering tank, this jet clean self-cleaning system, which is a big factor for this one. If you're getting a UV printer anywhere else on the market, there is this issue of needing to make sure keeping the tank clean, because UV ink will unfortunately be exposed to sunlight and potentially cure and cause clogs. One of the features of this device is the fact that it has this self-cleaning system, which drastically reduces the maintenance and makes it much easier for hobbyists like me to try and manage a machine rather than having to deal with larger ones, which have systems where you honestly need to be pretty much printing constantly or you're going to be running into a problem. So that's a big feature of this system, and it needs to be working. And from the sounds of it, 5 to 10% of the units were experiencing fluid leakage. Not a good thing. Just like they were right here, this could lead to damage to internal electronics, surface contamination, maintenance failure, so then you end up with these clogs. That's a big problem because this is a key feature of their device. They need this to be fixed. And what's honestly quite nice about this update is they actually have gone in and told us what's going on. So it's apparently made from injection molded plastic. Pretty common manufacturing technique. Just about everything these days is kind of using this manufacturing technique. And they apparently found that they had slightly insufficient volume, which caused shrinkage to the inner wall surface. That apparently was so small you couldn't see it, but it caused microscopic depressions, breaks the seal, things go downhill. Looks like machines using it, accuracy is around plus to 3%, but this lower precision made it possible for the units to receive slightly less material during molding. So it's possible even one specific injection mold unit doing this, because I'm guessing there was probably more than one doing it. One of the manufacturing machines, I'm guessing accuracy was off just enough to cause this problem, and it didn't get seen until they were doing final inspections. Then they tell us how they're correcting it. Well, we've switched this to a high precision electric screw injection. Its accuracy is 0.1, so that's going to cut down on the issues. They're also doing some additional testing with full range air tightness, 0 to 300 kPa. So I'm guessing this is making sure that it over and above handles the seal that we need. I'm guessing you probably don't even need that much pressure. I could be wrong. I'm not a mechanical engineer. If one of you guys in the comments are and can enlighten us on this subject, by all means, please leave a comment. But as a result, this means they need to remake the metering tanks. They don't have to build the entire device, but there's a part that needs to be replaced. And this process is unfortunately taking 1 month. All of this, I'm assuming, honestly probably has happened in the last 3 weeks, because their last message said we seem to be on track to start everything. And then in the last 3 weeks, if you got the laminator, people were starting to actually see these be delivered, but they weren't seeing the machines. And my guess is probably because this suddenly showed up. There are definitely people who are going, why didn't you tell us earlier? And to which I'm going, well, they let us know after 3 weeks. I mean, if this suddenly showed up, what did you expect them to do? Did you expect them to say, hey, we've run into a problem and we don't quite know what's going on, but we're working on it? And then eventually, hey, we figured out the problem. Now we're working on a solution. Hey, now we have a solution and here's the time. Did you want those messages on a weekly basis? Because I feel like 3 weeks, if all of this has happened in 3 weeks, and there's no reason to suggest that this problem was existing prior to their last message in August, it's possible, but I would like to err on the side that EufyMake was being very honest and they weren't hiding anything. So in 3 weeks, they've managed to find a problem, identify the cause, which probably took some heavy duty looking into, especially if the change was so precise that they couldn't even see it by the naked eye, that this was like a microscopic issue. And they've since then gone in and figured out how to fix it, have a plan, and then have a timeline with the plan. I feel like all of this in 3 weeks to me is pretty impressive. I feel like EufyMake responded as quickly as they could. In my opinion, they're sort of stuck in a catch-22. They could either say a problem is going on and leave all of us panicking and going, what the heck? Or they could wait a couple weeks, have a complete answer for us, and people be irritated that they didn't say anything earlier. I really feel like that's going on. And you definitely notice this if you look over at the EufyMake Facebook group, because as a result, the shipping timeline has been delayed. So they've now updated the timeline for shipping, and this is for the items. It looks like the rotary machine, the laminating machine, and the material kits. All of that is going to come out about the same timeline as we were expected, anywhere from August to November for like US, elsewhere November for the most part. But the printer is unfortunately where we're going to get this delay, and as a result, everybody has pretty much been moved to December to January. These dates honestly are pretty much the same regardless of whether or not it's the US or the rest of the world. And I don't know exactly what the original international timeline is, but I imagine this isn't a huge change for the international community. It just means that all of us here in the US are now delayed in getting the printer. But again, for a Kickstarter that ended in June, first machines drop and be delivered in December is still a pretty good timeline. In addition to that, they're actually offering some of us to test and make sure that these items are working properly, that there aren't additional problems. They're asking for 200 backers worldwide to do this product optimization, make sure things are working, with the ability to then have additional warranty time, and if there's a defective unit, they are going to address it. So I think that's kind of a nice, cool feature, is letting us, the product consumers, if we want to be part of batch testing these items and making sure they're working. And then, of course, they list how to enroll. It's going to open Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern US time, and then they have a link to their application. I'm not going to lie, this might potentially trigger a recurrence of the Taylor Swift Eras Tour, where we're all like constantly refreshing and trying to get tickets. Not that I did that, but I see that happening. So if you are absolutely wanting to be a mass production tester, you might want to be like ready to go 5-10 minutes prior. Just saying. And I do plan on trying to enroll. That way I can at least show you guys the device early, as well as how the current changes that they've done to the manufacturing process are working, to make sure are there any other flaws going on. So that is my hope. I will certainly be trying to get into the mass production tester application, but no guarantees. It's 200 slots. And like I said, every last one of us is probably going to be working on that. I don't think all of us, admittedly, out of the almost 18,000 backers, I imagine there's probably 2,000-3,000, maybe even 5,000 that might be interested in this. Still, it's one of those where you're going to have to get lucky. So with the changes in the timeline, this is obviously upsetting some people. And I kind of find it funny, the number of people in the Facebook group that are like, how can I get a refund? You know, I've been calling it, this is a Kickstarter. Even if, like, this is a Kickstarter, this is not a product that you're buying on Amazon where you're going to have it in 2 days, or possibly shorter if you live near an Amazon warehouse. Some of these posts I really kind of have to laugh. It's been 20 days. I'd have no idea what's going on. They update on about a monthly basis. It's like, everybody take a deep breath. It makes sense. People were expecting to see tracking codes around this time, and they were like, why haven't I seen it? Even though, again, they were only 3 weeks from making a previous update. I feel like this is still a reasonable timeline. Also, this is a Kickstarter. Timelines can be adjusted depending on manufacturing. Actually, that isn't even necessarily limited to Kickstarters. Any company can suddenly start dealing with changes in the manufacturing process or running into problems, and it's going to cause delay of releasing an item that was available for pre-order. That is just life. I think some of the most entertaining comments I've seen in the printer group was people who were like, I had planned to use this device to make items for my shop for Christmas. Now I can't do that. And while I'm empathetic to you being frustrated, also as a small business owner, I want to be like, you wanted to implement new products with a device that's brand new to the market with a month timeline, like assuming you were one of the lucky ones in the first batch of almost 18,000 printers. So you had to assume that you would be in that first initial shipping batch. And depending on how many printers they could produce a day, it really isn't necessarily realistic that you would probably be in that first batch. Again, I was crossing my fingers that I might be, but I mean, say they produce 200 printers a day, that's 1,400 printers in a week. It's gonna still take a month plus just to do that production. And that's assuming no problems. And then you still have to box them and ship them across the ocean. These aren't flown, these are being shipped in cargo units across the ocean. That alone takes time. And again, with manufacturing timelines, things always have delays. I think EufyMake was very optimistic with their timeline, and I think they might have avoided some of this craziness, some of these irritated people, if maybe they had sort of underpromised and over-delivered, saying like, you're more likely to get your device in October. And I think that might have maybe persuaded these people who were interested in using them to create items for Christmas from, okay, this isn't going to be in my timeline. But even then, there were people saying, was hoping to get this device by October so I could do Christmas items. And part of me wants to be like, you really expected to get a brand new machine in October and have your stuff ready for Christmas? Most of us have orders for Christmas things primarily in November, and then things start slowing down in December. Like, I'm just thinking about Etsy and ornament orders. And I definitely would not be creating a new product in October, especially with a new machine. Any new machine is going to have its nuances, and you're going to need to take time to learn it. These devices, while they're sold as turnkey, let's be realistic here. Everything takes adjusting. For instance, laser cutting. Like, when I got my laser machine, I thought I would be able to use it right out of the box. Everything would be hunky-dory, automatic settings. Yeah, no, that is not how that works. The amount of material that I had to test, the number of things that I set on fire in the first couple of weeks was entertaining, to say the least. Honestly, part of it was just playing with the software, like the Gweike cloud software sucks, and getting Lightburn up and running helped, but then I had to kind of learn Lightburn. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is these are all things that are going to play a role with the EufyMake printer. They have their own software. You're going to have to learn to use that software. You're going to have to make adjustments to whatever surface you're using. Like, it's UV ink, but is the item that you're using perhaps maybe needs some preparation in order for it to take the UV ink? There are many items that probably won't. I'm going to be one of those people that's going to probably be doing a lot of white acrylic. That, honestly, the only preparation I'm going to need for that should hopefully be effectively cleaning the surface with rubbing alcohol and making sure everything's dry before it gets hit with UV ink. And I'm basing that on having done some direct-to-film transfers just from experience. But other things may not be so willing to accept UV ink, and you may need to practice and test things, to say nothing of getting on target. I mean, it's using a camera on the system to accurately place things, but that doesn't change the fact that you might get some variation. So there's a lot of stuff I'm thinking. I can't possibly imagine an optimistic timeline where I'm getting a machine in October and have all of the things dialed out and worked out so that I have items I can post and be ready to sell for Christmas. Like, I love you all, but you're just way too unrealistic there. So does it suck that the timeline's been pushed back? And really, I feel like when you're looking at this timeline of who's getting printers, it's really just the US timeline that's being delayed and pushed back to what I imagine was probably most of the international timeline, where you guys were looking at like December into January. With the timelines matching up, most likely they've got all of the shipping issues worked out, like everything's lined up and they're not having to change that. They're just waiting for machines to be produced. So it's just a matter of, unfortunately, dealing with the fact that they have this part that needs to be replaced. And they want to make sure that the changes to this part work. Problems happen in manufacturing. The device clearly looks like it worked and they were having success. There aren't any influencers that I've seen on YouTube that are complaining that their machines aren't working. So it's most likely a scaled up production. And now we're starting to see some issues where one of the parts in the manufacturing process wasn't doing its job as effectively. And they're being transparent with how they're going about fixing this. So I know it's probably not a popular opinion, especially the people who are like, well, I want a refund for my Kickstarter. Yeah, I'm not sure it works that way. There's literally a risk clause built into Kickstarters that these timelines can be delayed or that you may never even get an item. And again, nobody's ever saying that you're not going to get your printer. Some of these people complaining, I think, even have like a Kickstarter number of like 5,000 or more. I would anticipate that it's going to take much longer to get your device. And that's just because first come, first serve, and it's a huge production process. We have this timeline. It may not make people happy, but honestly, I would say just be patient. They're being transparent with it. And honestly, getting this device within 6 months of ending from a Kickstarter, especially given the number of devices that have to be created, is pretty good. Be patient and dream about what you want to print. Like, get ideas going. And if you really are upset about this, then consider the fact that you should probably have maybe purchased a UV printer that's already out on the market, produced in mass quantity, and can be shipped to you in a couple of days. But keep in mind, you may not get the features that the EufyMake printer offers. Primarily one being it's a heck of a lot smaller and it's got this jet stream cleaning system, which they are trying to make sure completely works for everyone before it ships out. Now, I'm sure I have probably ruffled some feathers with my opinion of take a deep breath, just be patient. But I've learned anything being a talking head on the internet, it's that no matter what you do, you're going to ruffle feathers. To paraphrase a quote from one of my favorite books, if you're holding out for universal popularity, you're going to be in your room for a long time. It's a Kickstarter, guys. They're keeping us updated in what I think honestly is a fairly reasonable amount of messaging. Could EufyMake maybe be a little more transparent or maybe post a little more frequently in the future and perhaps mitigate some of this? Yes, in that just maybe on the Kickstarter post, like, you know, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, hey, everything's going to plan, we're doing good. Timeline hasn't changed much. Doesn't even have to be more than that, just a quick little comment. The messages that they've been posting are very detailed and they often include imaging and all that. Honestly, a quick little update here and there probably would appease some of the people that are very frustrated. But at the same time, I still think this is a realistic timeline. And I think everybody just needs to take a deep breath. We'll get our machines and we'll get our machines in the fairly near future. If it shows up in December, it shows up in December. If it shows up in January, it shows up in January. And keep in mind, this is still probably first batch, although I think the fact that they have run into a little bit of an issue might mean they've got machines that are already produced that they're then fixing and then shipping those out. And they've most likely updated the process, so they're still probably manufacturing things as well. But again, I don't know. I don't have an insight into their manufacturing process. This is still a pretty good timeline for a Kickstarter and for a machine like this. Anyway, that's my 2 cents for this video. I know it's a little bit different than some of my content, but I thought it would be a good react video. If you want to see more content like this, by all means, hit the subscribe button. I do all sorts of stuff involving laser cutting and 3D printing. My machines have been running this entire time. Hopefully they've not been affecting sound, to say nothing of the fact that my husband is watching Twisted Metal on the opposite wall. Here's hoping that the voice isolation feature in DaVinci will eliminate most of that for you guys. In the meantime, if you want to see more of my content, this is some of the things that I do and create over here on the channel. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.